queria chamar agora essa pessoa que é uma provocadora também. Ela é cofundadora, arquiteta de aprendizado na Offbeat, como eu falei, e vai apresentar esse próximo bloco sobre os novos papéis do RH. Então, com vocês, a Lavinia. Hi, Lavinia.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
First of all, thank you so much for participating with us of the creation of this program.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, and thank you for asking me to actually join organizing the festival a bit. I helped with bringing some people in, and I'm really happy to see them in the schedule. So thank you so much.
And you're here not because of that. You would be here even if you were not participating, because we love the way you think and the way you behave and provoke our L&D fellows here. So please, the stage is yours. So what are the new roles for L&D on those new times?
Thank you so much. So, hello everyone. I'm Lavinia Mehedintu. I am a learning professional, and I'm not used to speaking in front of large audiences or small ones. So I hope I don't mess this up. So right about now, you might be thinking, why am I here? I am a learning professional, so I should be used to speaking in front of crowds. I should be used to delivering training or facilitating workshops. And that's what I thought when I joined the industry a few years back. And I thought that mostly because that's what I was seeing around me. Like my more senior colleagues, L&D colleagues, were away all day delivering all kinds of sessions. So I quickly became the odd duck in the team because I was good at the work, like behind the scenes, but I couldn't bring myself to enjoy and be good at the things that other people were doing so naturally, being in crowds like this or even small crowds. But I didn't want to give learning up because I just love it, and I love the idea of what learning can do to people. So I thought, well, training can be the only thing that we can do, right? So I usually question myself and my ideas a lot, but at that point, I chose to stop questioning myself and actually question the way L&D was done. So I spent the last few years talking to people from all around the world and reading articles and research papers. And I can report that my gut feeling was right. We are doing L&D a bit wrong, let's say, like in a way that doesn't help our learners, that doesn't help our organizations, and it doesn't actually help us. So for the following few minutes, I will talk a bit about why we were doing learning and still do some things, and how did that impact our profile and our competencies, and where I see L&D going from now on. So my presentation is here, so I will just jump straight in. The first thing is what was expected of higher education. Basically, what we knew is that people were joining colleges and high schools, and they will be ready for their careers, and they would know everything they needed to know to have a successful career. So if you think about it, if everyone is ready when they start their job, why should you have an L&D function? So we were basically kind of optional. The second thing is that information wasn't so spread a couple of decades ago, like 2 decades ago. So if two people from different sides of the world were creating something, there was no way for them to share their thoughts and their work. So as L&Ds, we were kind of put in this seat of being the creators. Basically, we had to create a lot of content. Then the third thing is that, employee tenure was high. Like, I bet I have my grandparents and parents, and I bet you do too. And my guess is that they only had one or at most two roles their whole lives. So the focus of L&D for those companies that had L&D was to improve on-the-job performance, basically help people become the best they can for the roles they had. Then, well, this is kind of new, actually. If you mentioned someone 2 years ago, how would it feel like if we would work remotely? They would come up with every reason why remote doesn't work and on-site should be the only option on one side. And on the other side, a short fun fact that I didn't know was that e-learning was invented in the 1960s, but it didn't become a thing until, basically this century. So what could we do as L&Ds? You basically had to be really good at delivering in-person training. And the last context is that technology was scarce. Like, it started blooming, but we didn't have so many options. So not only us, but our colleagues as well had to do a lot of manual work. So I called this L&D profile, and you can see Picasso here, the creator. Like, this is what I think L&D was in the past. And I'm going to talk about the other profile. I don't think we're there yet, but some of the things that I'm going to talk about are already on our radar, which is obviously really cool. So going back, first, you might have heard already that higher ed is becoming obsolete. Like, we now know that it's not ready to build this profile to facilitate people, becoming aware of themselves and help them learn throughout their lives, right? So we can step in and help with facilitating that context for people to keep learning. So we stopped being optional and now we are mandatory. Then the second thing, which I bet everyone is experiencing, is that Google is our best friend. So every time we have a question, we can go on Google and we can find answers. The problem is that now we are experiencing information overload. So there are so many resources that you are overwhelmed with the amount. And there are other questions on the table, like which are the best sources to look for information, for articles, for podcasts, for videos, and so on. Jumps in the curator, like one of my many hats. Basically, as a curator, what you're doing is helping people make sense of the mess and the complexity by providing them with high quality information. So they don't, so they can't skip those questions about quality. And then the thing that has happened over the last few years is that employee tenure is not that great, So what happened starting with the pandemic is that people started leaving their jobs, So right now, throughout our lives, we might have up to 8 roles, which I know is crazy. And the other crazy thing is that those 8 roles might probably not even be in the same organization. So what happened for us as L&Ds is that we became retention drivers. Again, another really recent trend is the talk of the town, that we are moving toward hybrid and remote workplaces. And because we are moving toward those workplaces, and because e-learning is now, not only e-learning, but the digital space is broader, we have to become digital learning architects. And last but not least, obviously, technology is everywhere. Now we can automate some of our manual work, which is great from my point of view. Then our focus might be less on the more technical stuff and more on the what is now called power skills, basically those skills that help people not become obsolete. So we have to, help them in this technology world to just have the skills to survive. And the last thing is that technology made us a bit more data-driven. So I named this future role the connector. And this is Nokia because it was connecting people, basically. And I wanted to talk a bit about all the connections that I've discovered that L&D could help with. So I'm jumping here. The first one, and I feel it's a theme of this festival, is about connecting people with themselves. And to, when connecting people with themselves, how do we do that? And the trends you should be looking at is what I called self-awareness programs. Like, we have all kinds of coaching programs. We are starting using behavior change frameworks and tools to help people acquire learning habits and become, again, more aware of themselves and moving towards the self-directed learning profile, which I think it's great because they are in the driver's seat, and it's, we as L&Ds, we can focus on other stuff, on other connections. The second connection is between people and people. And my very, very, very good friend, Ana Maria, was here yesterday talking about communities of practice, which is a trend that it's definitely growing. Mentoring programs are also starting to be everywhere. And in some edge cases, I've heard about peer coaching groups becoming a thing as well. So once we help people connect with themselves, we can, help them connect with others as well. Then it's something that I just talked about, which is connecting content to people's needs. So what I think is really, really, really cool is that, I can find an article written by Conrado, for example, halfway across the world, and I can send it to my subscribers in Offbeat. And because, as an L&D, you look for those really good resources. You basically just train your eye to spot the ones that are high quality and could be useful for your audiences. Then you have something that I love, which is connecting people with roles in the organization. Basically, connecting them with themselves. It's a first step in this journey, but once they are aware of themselves, you also have to be the one that markets the roles that are available, the roles that are needed in the organization right now, and not only right now, but in the future as well. So they have this visibility, they have this awareness of the two sides, and they can actually prepare for what's coming. And the trends to look at here are internal talent marketplaces and using marketing for L&D purposes. Another connection I saw is between people and organization. And there are two things I want to mention here. The first one I've seen is about culture development. And I feel this is impacted a lot also by the Great Resignation, because again, we become drivers of retention. So we need to know how to facilitate that culture where people actually want to be. And the second trend is looking at the employee experience journey, and as a learning and development professional, spotting the steps where we can intervene to make sure that people are connected to our organizations, like onboarding, career development, performance management, or anything else. Then we go into the more hard stuff of L&D. The first thing is about connecting the L&D strategy and the business strategy. And how I look at it is that some of us might really, really like the business side of things. We might like understanding business models, how our organizations make money or how they spend money, and how do each of the roles and teams we have in the organization contribute to how the business is performing. So there's this new role out there, which is called performance consultant. And I think it's going to be booming over the next few years. And it's great for people with more analytical mindsets and that really, really like this business side of things. The next connection, and I'm not going to talk much about it because I know that Christopher Lind is coming later on, like Conrado mentioned, he's coming later on to talk about how technology is impacting the workplace and L&D, and he's way better at explaining this than I am. But what I would look at is trying to understand how ourselves can, understand better what business, our organizations and our people need from technology, what technology we already have out there, not jump straight into acquiring all kinds of tools, of learning management systems and so on, but rather have very, very good understanding of our ecosystem before, jumping into buying anything. And I've seen this, what happened with the pandemic was that we were so desperate in, having some tools to facilitate interaction online that we started acquiring all these tools, but we haven't had the chance to actually explore them at their best. And so I think we really should do that. I will let Chris speak about the other things later on. And if you haven't lost me until now, the last connection I'm seeing is between the organization and the future of work. And there are three things really interesting that are happening. The first one is how ourselves as L&D can make the organization and individuals aware of the skills that are going to be really, really important in the future, which again are for some reason called power skills. The second thing is that we are moving to hybrid and remote workplaces, and how can we as L&Ds help with that transition, both the organization and the individuals. And the last thing, which is really, really complex, is this idea of decentralized autonomous organizations, which are becoming kind of like a trend. And they are a lot about, again, not having too much control over the organization, but rather it's going to organize by itself mostly because of the culture. So what I think can happen is that we can become the connector, and in comparison to the creator, the connector L&D is actually holding the space for individuals and for organizations to grow by paying attention to all these synergies and actually acting on them. And I can tell you that we can do that. Just let's see what questions we have out there. Thank you so much for listening so far.
Thank you, Lavinia. It's so good. And the idea of see ourselves as connectors, I think it's excellent. So congrats and thank you a lot. But I'm a speaker only. We have the host here, so sorry for interrupting you. Actually.
Yes. Now you're going to allow me to interview both of you. So first, thank you, Lavinia. We love what you just shared with us. So good, your content, and everyone was here. The chat was on fire, like people sent a bunch of questions. So we're going to ask the question, and then feel free, Conrado, Lavinia, to take over and start answering. So the first one I have is, let's see here, where we're going to start. How to start building a learning culture in a company that still doesn't value this type of action, or thinks that training is just for employees to stop complaining about the lack of training?
What a sad word. Go on, Lavinia.
You're leaving me with the hard questions. So I think, again, we should start by making maybe people aware of what learning really is, what behavior change really means, so they can first stop asking for training, in my opinion. And then there's this idea of what habits do you have in an organization that, makes it a learning culture. And I think Conrado already covered some very, very interesting small habits you can start with. You don't have to start with everyone. You can actually prototype, take a team that it's more aware of this and more prone to accepting these kinds of habits, and prototype with them and then market it to the whole organization when it works.
You know what? Ask the beginning of the question again. Read the beginning of the question again, please.
I can ask you again, if I can find here. So many questions. How to start building a learning culture in a company that still does not value this type of action?
What type of action? There's a preconception here that learning culture has any type of action that's different from traditional learning. Yes, it is, but I mean, if you're saying that, listen, I'm going to have every 2 months, every other month, I'm going to have a half day called Learning Lab. We're going to bring companies or the department's most important issues, and they're going to work around it so they can have a new problem. And more than that, we're going to find a specialist to be there with them. I don't think that the business won't like it. And this is training. This is what we're talking. So the first thing is, I don't know who wrote the question, that this type of, there's no type of action, if well-structured, connecting to learning culture, that the business won't like, or the leaders won't like. They will like because it will be actions that's going to improve the employees' engagement, the employees' performance. So I just would like to check, and I do this all the time with our clients and our friends in L&D, for you to perceive that somehow we have a perception that these other initiatives, informal, non-formal initiatives, or communication initiatives, are not as good or as important as the training when you have all the structure. So, I mean, you have to prototype, because this is the only way that you're going to prove and show to the company that, listen, this is happening. Listen, we have people that are more willing. And we had yesterday, again, on all the cases that we saw, some interesting KPIs regarding learning culture, like engagement, like pulse questions, like culture, and also like performance, and like turnover, this kind of thing. So there's no such a thing as type of actions regarding learning culture. It's a group of interventions that you can do together. You don't even have to call it learning. Call another thing. But I think we know that the result is there.
Yeah, so what I'm just hearing here is that it needs to be organic. People don't feel it's about learning culture, right? It's personalized, so they're just like, hey, it's like going to work and get my coffee and learning something, but it's not about the L&D vocabulary. It's much more, it's embedded in the every action of the employee.
Perfect. And it's connected to the work.
Connected to the work. I love that. But we have here a big question. for both of you. What is the level of maturity of learning culture that you see most of the companies, or not that you see, but you think like majority of the companies that we have today, what is their level of maturity for learning culture? And what's your vision for what the future is going to be for the maturity inside of the organizations?
So let me start this one first, Lavinia. Then you go, just to change. And I can say in Brazil, and I can say in our experience.
He likes to take turns, Lavin. Get used to.
It's fine.
The thing is, there are probably a handful of companies here in Brazil that they have structured action on learning culture. For instance, I can say Nubank. I'm not talking about our clients. I already talked about it. Nubank, she participated in the academy that I'm going to talk a little bit about it in some minutes. But Nubank is doing an amazing work. So the thing that, if you have 4 levels, like this was the way the high-impact learning organizations, the way that Josh Bersin likes to structure, he's not even using it anymore. I would say that 85–90% is level 1 or level 2. So there's a lot of things that we have to do. And the fact is we are not doing anything because you don't have any department or process or structured initiatives of learning culture inside the company. So, I mean, we are in the beginning of this process. This is my view from Brazil. Lavinia, what do you see in the rest of the world?
What I feel is that some older organizations, let's say, are having a hard time adapting, which is completely natural because there are so many habits and behaviors they already have, and the unlearning process is really, really hard. But what I also see is that startups are coming with a blank slate. And maybe I'm mistaken, but Nubank is not such an old company, right? It's maybe been a startup for a couple of years. So I see these organizations that start with the mindset of we are going to grow only if we're learning, and they don't even have learning professionals at first, right? But only because they start with this mindset, they will probably grow in a direction where learning is always going to be important for them. So I see this distinction. I avoided answering about the levels because there are so many frameworks out there, and I'm not sure which one the one who asked is referring to, but that's my view.
What about you, Deb? What's your view on this, on your clients or on the level of...
Now I'm being asked too.
Yeah,
That's when you know you asked a hard question, you know? It's when the interviewers are sending you back the question. I'm going to give my view based on my everyday job, which is...
This is Latin America,
This is
right?
Latin America, and living for... I don't know if you know, but I lead the sales team for Degree in Latin America. So I do talk to a lot of companies and try to understand what it is, their level of maturity, you know, where they are to start adding a technology that can enable the learning culture that I've been talking about. Lavin pointed an important point, which is the startups. 100% agree with you. They are moving fast. They are modernized the way that they want to learn already. They're coming from companies that they want to break the rules. So they're for sure with a different view, and they want to much faster like enable their users, and they know like the market is so competitive, so they need to invest. So I think if we put the startups on the side and talk about the majority companies in Brazil, I would say that the level of maturity for learning culture, I would say that it is a level that is aware. We have awareness. They know what learning culture is or should be. They have an idea. We have companies that are already trying to take the first step on it by either hiring people that can come and talk about learning culture so they can bring this awareness outside of the HR, outside of the L&D teams, so they can start evangelize the rest of the organization. And they're already trying to test some tools to put in place to enable the learning culture. So, Lavinia, I'm trying to avoid, to use different level of maturities. It just explain what that level of maturity for me means. And then for the rest of Latin America, it's much harder. We are probably in step 1 of trying to teach them, try to educate them what learning culture is. We have companies that come to us and ask, but what it is a learning culture? Like they're so stuck in the command and control. They're living their world still because of the rules of the organizations. We don't have that many startups in place yet. But we do have some use cases of companies that are already taking the first step. So I would say like rest of Latin America, the level of maturity is pretty low. And then Brazil, medium to high, because they're already taking some good steps to make the change.
That's why I ask you, because I know that we're going to have this amazing...
I try. I hope it's helpful for everyone. But it is a hard question to ask for sure. Third question. Peter Drucker says that culture is a strategy for breakfast. In this case, does the organization culture change start with the change of recruitment, meaning the people that we bring inside of the organization, the ones that we are hiring? If so, what to do with employees and leaders that are already in place? Lavinia, you go first because we're taking turns.
Oh my God. Yeah. So all these are really, really hard questions, I have to admit. I do think that, to be honest, recruitment is really important. Again, if we go back to what we were saying earlier with the startups that come up with this new way of thinking, it's just the same with organizations. If you bring in people with this mindset, it basically pollinates, and you make sure that you keep the culture like it is. But the reality is that in some companies you need to hire fast, and at some point you might lose control of the quality of new hires. But regarding what you can do with the leaders that you already have, I think we touched it a bit with the answer in the first question. It's about exposure. It's about showing them what they are already doing, that it's learning, and just prototyping new ways of learning in the organization that, again, like you both said, they don't even need to be learning. Like I was reading the other day about project or team retrospectives. They are not called learning, but in their essence, they are about learning through reflection. That's just an example. So you need to make people aware about the things that are doing, that are already learning, and to expose them to other tools, frameworks, to just adopt them in your organization.
Love that. I always start with the first wave, right? Of people trying to, make this change. And to the other session that we had, that Conrad said, hey, maybe a small group, but then, can be contagious too inside of the organization. Oops, something dropped here. But I want to thank you, Lavinia and Conrado.
Thank you.
For your presentation, both presentations, and for sharing all this amazing knowledge with us today, and for answering our hard questions from our audience. As you can tell, they're so engaged. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you, Lavinia.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.